Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Modern Brewer Podcast with me, your host, Chris Lewington. I have another returning guest, and this one has been a fan favorite. Our last episode titled Hoponomics was insanely popular. One of the most valuable listens of the show so far. I've had quite a few brewers who've come up to me and said it's changed the way that they contract their hops. And for some, they'd actually stop contracting altogether. Doug's an amazing public speaker. He's so good at delivering key, actionable information in a digestible way. Not only that, but Doug gives an independent view of the hop world that you will not find by anyone else associated with the hop market. The hop market has made some good steps towards transparency and fairness. But as with any information you get from a business or from someone associated with one, it's always loaded. And Doug certainly isn't tied to any hop company. And that's why I really wanted Doug back on the show to give us an independent, real-world view of the hop harvest in 2024 in the US and in Germany. Before we get into the hop harvest report for 2024, I have a question for you. Have you ever brewed the perfect batch, where the hop combinations marry perfectly? You nail the balance of the beer. Everyone who is tasting out of the tank is absolutely raving about it, and you're buzzing. And then you get it canned, and your work of art turns a bit dull, flat, and lifeless. Well, that's probably because your packaging equipment isn't made by a manufacturer who has over 100 years of manufacturing experience. Pneumatic Scale Angelus has been doing exactly that. They offer world-class open air and counter-pressure canning lines capable of doing 50 to 250 cans per minute at industry-leading TPO levels. On top of world-class TPO levels, Pneumatic Scale Angelus are recognized as the global leader in can seaming technology. Seaming is one of the most important aspects of canning. Have you ever wondered what it's like to have to sift through 18 pallets of cans to find all of the leakers and squidgy cans? Well, I have, and let me tell you, it sucks. So make sure your canning equipment has the high quality seaming technology. Otherwise, that could be you too. And have you ever heard of those brewers who have their canning lines down during their busiest period? They try to source spares or a technician, and they have to wait weeks or even months for an engineer and spare parts. Well, Pneumatic Scale Angelus have a UK and EU service team with spares in stock, so you don't have to worry about long downtimes crippling your ability to sell. Finally, if you are new to canning or have members of your team who are, Pneumatic Scale Angelus offers seam training at their brand new training facility in Nottingham. There is no textbook that can replace real life operator training. So this is a must for anyone looking to ensure they don't have to throw away poorly seamed stock. If you want to check out the global leader in seaming technology and speak directly to a member of the PSA team, then go meet Tom at booth 513 at the aforementioned iconic Brewers Congress on September the 23rd and the 24th. If you're listening to this after those dates or you can't attend, then make sure you message Tom with any questions on the canning lines and seaming technology via the link in the show notes. Be a part of PSA's growing customer base who value low TPOs, canning lines at scale, and world-class seaming technology. Okay, listeners, let's get back to the show. Staying up to date with the hop harvest will help you navigate the hop market with more confidence and understanding. It also makes for great chat at brewing conferences, as people will really think you know what you're talking about, which, let's face it, is totally essential. So please welcome back one of my favorite guests of the podcast so far, Douglas Mackinnon. Okay, so welcome back to the show, Douglas Mackinnon.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, it's good to be here. Nice to be back. It was fun last time. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Yeah, man. As I said many times to many people, I think it was one of my favorite episodes, not only because of the excellent content you gave, but also married my two favorite things, which was hops and economics. So it was a really great episode for me personally. I found it totally
Yeah, if
fascinating.
there's other people out there that like to nerd out on hop economics, I think they'll like this one too. I don't know how
Yeah.
big that audience
Do you know?
is, but hopefully there's some.
Do you know what? I can't lie to you, Doug. I thought the same after releasing the episode. I was like, this is great content, but it's niche, niche, niche. And actually, been top three most listened to episodes. So
Wow.
turns out people are desperate to learn more about the economics of the hop
Well,
market.
that's good. So I've got to shoot for number one then, third place. And
Yeah, well,
okay.
this is our
I'll
opportunity to
I'll do my
redeem.
best. I'll try.
If you can get nailed down two of the top three
Oh,
episodes,
true.
Doug, that
Yeah.
would be some
Gold and
achievement.
silver and bronze. Yeah. Good deal. All
Yeah.
right. I'll do my best.
Oh, that's great, man. Well, look, for those people who missed out on the Hoponomics episode and just want to listen to the Hop Harvest 2024 episode, can you just give those listeners a little bit of a higher level of who you are and how you've come to be ended up on this podcast?
Yeah, sure. So I started off in the hop industry back at the end of '99 as director of Hop Growers of America. I did that for 5 or 6 years. I don't remember now. I think it was 5. But yeah, and then I started doing something I called the Mackinnon Report back then. And I'm doing the Mackinnon Report now, but it's very different. So back then, that was before social media and all that sort of stuff. So I was just basically traveling back and forth between Europe and the US and documenting how the crop was progressing and talking about market information. And it was a subscription thing. So there were growers and brewers and merchants that subscribed back then. That lasted until, well, that kind of put me everywhere all the time. And I ended up in the right place at the right time to learn about the 2007 shortage, I guess we can call it, deficit. So I learned about that probably 6 or 8 months before it actually happened, before the rest of the world found out about that. So then I became a hop dealer. I guess that was a good decision at the time. And so I did that until 2019 in various forms, crashed and burned in 2019. That's a fun story sometime, maybe for a different episode, but that's a long story. But I learned a lot, and so it's not been a bad thing. Since then, I've gotten my PhD in agricultural economics and started up the Mackinnon Report again. This time it's much more economics focused and market focused, and rather than like development of the crop and that sort of thing. So it's more of an analysis of what's going on in the market, which I think fits in nicely with the kind of discussion we're hoping to have here today. So
Exactly.
yeah, that's a quarter of a century in a nutshell. Yikes.
It's terrifying how quickly you can sum up your whole life.
Yeah, well, there were some other high points in there too, but yeah, we'll leave those out.
Yeah.
Non-hop related, but yeah, it's good. So yeah, I still keep in touch with brewers and growers all around the world and merchants that I worked with in the past, and so I still have all the contacts that I had, and so that's almost all. I don't keep in touch with everybody, but yeah, so that still allows me to have a good feel for what's going on. So.
Awesome. Yeah, and I don't think there's anyone that I could think of who is better to take us through the hop harvest for 2024 and how that can be used by brewers, and also how that feeds into the bigger hop industry and market and economics, as we kind of went through in the previous episode.
Yeah, that's very kind of you to say. But there are plenty of people who know as much or more than me, but they're biased. They'll tell you a story that's going to serve their needs rather than an objective story. I don't have any money to make on whether hop prices go up or down right now, and so I have no reason to fudge the truth or I'm just going to tell you what
Exactly.
I know. And the PhD actually helped a lot. I mean, I really just did it for fun because I wanted to do that my whole life, but it helped me learn how to analyze economics and stuff like that a little better and maybe in a different way than I was doing before. So hopefully the type of articles that I'm writing in my Substack are, well, I've been told they're like little research papers, each one of them. But
Yes.
so hopefully they provide some value to people. That's my only goal. Yes, that.
Absolutely. I mean, that McKinnon report is one of the best referenced. They're exactly right. They're like journal articles available on the web.
Yeah.
It's amazing the level of detail and reference and validity that it goes through. And each one almost paints like a story. It's just so good. Like,
Thanks.
you're an excellent
Thank
writer,
you.
Doug, as I said in the previous one. I'll definitely say it again
Thanks.
now. For anyone who wants to keep updates work, we'll stick a link for the McKinnon report in the show notes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks.
Um, so, Doug, why don't we just kick off with probably the most exciting hop market for some, which
Yeah.
is the US hop harvest. So, can you give us some key insights? What's been going on in the US hop harvest in 2024?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of really popular varieties that everybody wants. Citra, Mosaic, Cascade, all those varieties get harvested sometime kind of in the middle of September. So it's a busy time. Of course, it's a lot less busy now because of the acreage reductions than it was just a couple of years ago. But there's a lot going on. But back in July, I think that was when I published my last article. I did a forecast based on using a 5-year average for the crop, and at that time I said it should be around 80 million pounds. And at the end of July, early August, the IHGC, the International Hop Growers Convention, met, and the estimate from the U.S. delegation there was 87 million pounds. It sounded optimistic. So I thought, well, gosh, how was I off so much? But then since then, they've started to walk that back. And so I've heard 85, I've heard 84. So I have a feeling when it comes down to it closer to the end, it's going to be a lot closer to 80 than it is to 87. So, but you never, like they say, you never know what you get until it's in the bale. And I guess one indication is of how things are doing, because really only aroma hops have been picked so far. All the alphas come at the end of the harvest, so the end of September. And centennials are doing pretty well. And that would be one variety that you would expect to see a reaction in, given how hot it's been in Yakima the past month. It's been really, really hot, above normal temperatures. I mean, it's always hot in Yakima at this time of the year, at least for 2 or 3 weeks straight. But it was over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, obviously, in Yakima in August for a while too. And so that's a little early, and Centennial is sensitive to heat. Most hops don't really care about heat as long as they have water. They're fine, and they need plenty of water. But that's not a problem, and hasn't really been a problem this year. I mean, earlier in the year there was some water rationing, and you heard stories that it's going to be a bad crop because there's no water. There's not enough water. Water's going to be a problem. And that I think falls into the camp of, if growers are always trying to find a way to build value of the crop they're growing, whether it's justified or not. And I'm not saying that there was no water problem. There were a few people that have farms on the Rosa Irrigation District, which is one section of the Yakima Valley, and they had water rationing there. But in general, most people didn't have any trouble with water. And even in the most, let's say, the driest years over the past 20 years, it hasn't affected the yields that much. When that happens in the U.S., or in the Yakima Valley in particular, everything is under irrigation there. Everything's under drip irrigation. So they've got everything under control pretty well. They don't use as much water as they used to. And you can trade water rights. Some people have water rights that just allow them they could turn the water on in April and turn it off in October, and let it run the whole time and not get charged any extra because they have those water rights. I mean, you wouldn't do that, of course, because that would be bad for hops too. But I guess my problem is the farmers are clever enough to figure out a solution to the water problem. And most of them don't really have serious problem with that to begin with. I mean, if you think of all the acreage that's come out in the last 2 years alone, it's like 20,000 acres. Most of those acres are still sitting there with trellis. I mean, a lot of them, they have water rights attached to them too. And water rights are fungible, so they can be shifted around. And if you don't use it here, you can use it there. And so, but the main point, I guess, is even a bad crop in the US is really only 10% less than a normal crop. And so bad crops happen to bad. I mean, 10% down, 10, 11% down. 2022, that happened. And 2020, that happened. The thing, there's been a couple times where if there's heat, like in June, early heat, over 100 degrees, that's happened twice in the last 10 or 15 years. And that's caused kind of a surprise low yield in some varieties where everything looks fine, as you're driving by and all, but then the hop cones don't weigh out like they should. So, but that's not happening this year. That's not the problem this year, even though there was some heat in July also. Apparently it didn't affect the crop that way. So yeah, water is kind of under control. Of course, it has to be in the Yakima Valley because it doesn't rain. And that's the big difference, I would say, between American hop production and European hop production. Because on the continent there, of course, you get plenty of rain in England, and in Germany, normally they do too. And this year they had plenty, and certain hops like it when it's warm and wet. But if they don't have rain, they can have swings in their yields that are 25, even 30%. I mean, some varieties have been affected even worse than that. Czech Saaz, for example, could be, I think, 2022, I think it was down 50%. So, I mean, they're very sensitive, and drip there is not as common as it is in the US. But then even where there is drip, it's kind of like it's not used all the time. And so it's used in emergencies, which is great. So it keeps the plant alive, but the root structure of the plants develops in a way as it's used to rain. So the roots spread out more, whereas like if you have drip, the roots are going to go down deeper right in that one little place. So when you have, like in Germany, for example, let's say you have drip, so it's getting water to the plant, but not to all the roots. And so it keeps the plants alive and it'll deliver a crop, but it's going to be less of a crop than normal. But that's not a problem this year because they had plenty of rain. But they are experiencing kind of lower, maybe they had a little too much rain. They are experiencing lower than expected yields, as everybody thought the yields were going to be pretty decent, at least with the aromas. And the aromas are coming in kind of just average at best in Germany. So they'll have an average crop, but people were expecting a little more. The alphas seem to be doing really well, and that's to be expected. They seem to thrive on the kind of weather where it rains a little bit every day. It's muggy and overcast, not a lot of bright hot sun, but warm. So they tend to thrive on that, and they've gotten a lot of that this year. So that's what's going on in Germany. And the only difference with the only country that I would say is not in that camp would be Slovenia, because they're south of the Alps, and that keeps all that continental weather north. So they have totally different weather down there, and they'll either have, they can have a good crop when Germany's having a bad crop, or vice versa. And this year they're not doing so well. The yields are down, especially for Solea, which is a popular variety in Asia and all over actually. But so there's not enough of that to go around. And Aurora, which is kind of like a pearly, but growing in Slovenia, it's a higher alpha there. It can be 10% even. That's doing okay. There's plenty of that, but of course, there's not as much demand for that. So it's always like that, though. I mean, there's always a lot of demand for the variety that isn't doing very well. So that's kind of where we are on the crop progress. So it's still, harvest is still going in Europe too. It starts earlier and ends earlier. So I would say in about a week or so, they'll be finishing up. So around, let's say the 20th of September, things will be
Mhm.
finished there. So and there, just like in the US, the alphas come last. So, uh, but there's no reason. I mean, they look good so far. So I think we'll just see an average crop out of Europe in general. So
Hmm.
no crazy shortages like a couple years ago.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen. So it's a good opportunity for people to maybe stock up a little bit on some of those varieties. Uh,
So has there been any varieties, US or Germany or Slovenia, have been like heavily affected by disease or anything that's really affected them up until this point where you know that the yields are going to be low on a variety basis?
that's a good question. I mean, in any given year, there's always something, and I don't know of any that are causing big problems this year. Now, the thing with that is, so there's the farmers are good at what they do, and so they can handle it. They have people. I mean, in the U.S., they have people out scouting fields, and in Europe, the farms are a lot smaller, and so it can be the owner himself out there looking at each field. And so it's really just a matter of catching the problem early and then dealing with it, which means spraying something on there to either get powdery mildew, downy mildew, mites. So there's always problems, but they're good at dealing with them and catching them early. And if they catch them at the right time, then potentially serious problem isn't really an issue. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's just, I mean, I remember years when in the US, for example, when powdery mildew pressure was really high, you'd have growers spraying like every 4 or 5 days each field, which is a lot more frequent than they normally do. So that's more expensive. But if they don't do that, then they have to stay ahead of those kind of things, diseases and pests. Otherwise you can't recover if you get behind. But fortunately they're really good at that. So those kind of issues don't happen that often anymore, I guess. So,
Because you always read about the diseases being an issue.
well,
And that's why I'm curious to hear like if there is any significant issues with disease on varieties,
you know
etc.
what?
But yeah, you often read that there's issues.
Yeah. Yeah. And that again goes back to like the water issue. I mean, they're going to try to make it sound like, oh, there's going to be a short crop, contract now.
Yeah.
That happens a lot in the early part of the year. You'll always see that in the spring and the early summer. But then as things start to develop, you realize a lot of that was just BS, propaganda.
Yeah. So you're saying generally across the board, it's been a pretty average year. There's no sort of major issues or no major successes, I guess would be one way of looking at it, but it is pretty average across the major hot
Yeah.
markets.
Yeah. Like I mentioned, the estimates in the US are coming down. So there's problems there. I mean, there's been pressure from all the things you would expect, pests and diseases, but nothing so overwhelming that it's going to be a 10% down year. It's going to be, so
Mhm.
I have to remember that so in my 80 million prediction, uh, there were a couple low years in there. So to be even close to that presumes there's some problems because so
Yeah. Okay.
2020 and 2022 were in that average, and those were both not great years. So that allowed for some problems which is why I didn't adjust it upward when I came up with that, because I'd heard about the heat. This was, I think, July 26th when I published that. So the heat was already known up until that point. The water problem was a known issue at that point for the few farms that it affected. And so I left it, I didn't adjust it upwards, which is what I would have done back in the day when I was at Hop Brewers of America, because back then, had to produce the numbers that went to the International Hop Growers Convention. And so those numbers represented the U.S. estimate of what the crop would be. So I kind of used that same methodology for that article. So you talk to a few key people who know what's going on and adjust up or down as necessary. So just in general, because you just need to be close. I mean, it's not like predicting specific yields on every variety. So
Yeah.
that'd be tough. But there are, I mean, like I mentioned, the Centennial likes more mild weather and usually doesn't respond well to the high heat. And usually when Centennial's doing well, Cascade is performing as well. But this year it seems to be okay. But yeah, supply issues, I don't really see. I mean, with the massive surplus that's hanging out there, I don't really see any supply issues right now. I mean, of course, they've taken out 20,000 acres so far in the U.S., which is massive. That's about a third of what was there.
Yes.
So,
Wow.
yeah, I guess that'd be about 8,000 hectares or so. And I fully expect there'll be more acreage coming out in 2025. And I think, well, part of the problem, really one thing that's complicating the situation is that the demand for beer is decreasing. So they don't really know where the bottom is. They don't know. So there's no way to make a soft landing because they don't know where the runway is exactly. You know, they don't know when they're going to touch down. And so, and they don't have as much control as you might think because of the way agriculture has to, it's an annual cycle. And so they can make these, janky steps down. But they've been erring on the side of caution so far. Taking the fact that it took 2 years to take out 20,000 acres, they should have done that in 1 year. So what's happening is really they're prolonging the surplus by not just cutting really. So why do they do that? I think it has to be because at the bottom of it, they're hop farmers, all of them, even the merchants, because every merchant grows hops and then a lot of them own part of one merchant company. And so they don't want to remove acreage. That's kind of against their DNA. They want their neighbor to remove their acreage and they'll keep their acreage where it is. Thank you. And so they're hesitant to do that. And it makes sense because once you take it out, I mean, if you take the hop plants out, that's not as big of a deal. But once you start taking trellis down, well, then you need a big market, some kind of boom to be able to afford to put that back in. So it's a pretty permanent decision once you take trellis out. That's why a lot of trellis is still in the ground, with hops not growing in it. But once that's
just hops.
Once that starts to come out, then something's changed. And I think we'll start to see a lot more of that next year because it's clear. So the first year, so 2023, first year of the serious reductions, there was a lot of optimism. People, well, at least among the majority of growers, they were, people would say, I'll just wait a year and see how it turns out. Maybe next year will be better. And that's like a total farmer thing to say. They always think that next year can be better, which is great. I mean, they're optimistic in general, but it's also because they don't want to let go of the trellis and because they know how hard it is to go back. And so last year, that was last year. So 2024, this year, it started to get a little bit more real because, nothing corrected in the last year. Maybe we can hang on one more year. So they do that because they have the money to be able to do that. They've been making good profits for a long time now. And they've all grown to a certain level that they never would have been had there been no craft beer boom. And they don't want to go back down to where they were. And so they can afford to do something that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense if you can read the market. I remember what I was going to say before, the money thing that enables them to afford to be able to take care of the crops as well as they do also. So that money, the fact that they're flush with money, in the US at least, enables them to make decisions they wouldn't otherwise make. But that's going to come to an end, I think, quick here, because the writing's on the wall. There's got to be more acreage coming out next year. It's not going to be fixed next year either. There could be more acreage. I mean, depending on how much acreage they take out in 2025, there could be even more coming out in 26. You just don't know. But it's what's clear right now is that it's not a problem that's going to be fixed right away. This is a long-term solution, and the surplus complicates things a lot. But the fact that demand for beer is going down as it is just kind of muddies the water. So you don't know what you're aiming for. Like you're shooting at a target in the dark. And so they'll keep, like I said, they're erring on the side of caution, taking out just a little bit when they could have taken out more. And they're going to keep doing that because they're aiming for a soft landing. They want to end. It's like, you remember the space shuttle, how that used to fly in? There were no engines on that were working. So it's just gravity pulling you down. And then like right at the end, the pilot would pull back on the stick, lift the nose up and glide in for a soft landing. But he could see the runway. So imagine if you can't see the runway and you have no instruments showing you where it is, how do you know when to pull up and make it so they're trying to encourage that soft landing now, but it's too soon. And so they're just exacerbating the problem. But that's really nothing new in the hop industry. It's new with aroma hops, but normally that kind of thing happens with alpha. It's happened with alpha hops for decades. You have a surplus, and then acreage comes out. There's this price spike, it encourages a surplus, and then the acreage gradually comes out over time, but not as fast as it should. And so that surplus lasts longer and longer than it should. And so that encourages an overcorrection. And then so your demand and your supply cross at some point. So, and you don't even know when that happens. And that leads to, that's the hop cycle, basically, that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And so they're desperately trying to figure out where that cross is, because if you can find that and make a soft landing, then they can avoid the next cycle. And with proprietary varieties, as much of the crop as they are right now, they can just lock everything down and control the growth on the other end, which is, I'm sure, what they'll do once they get there. They're not going to make the same mistake again with forcing contracts the way they did, or as long as they did. I'm not going to say that won't happen, because that's probably going to happen again, where, if there's a shortage of something, they're going to push 5-year contracts again. But to keep that going, those forcing 5-year contracts for 12 years, that was greedy. And I fell victim to that. I was greedy just like the rest of them. I made the same stupid mistakes they made, and they're making still. Because you see, it's like the knee-jerk reaction is, oh, you got a contract. But why would any brewer contract in a market where there's 100 million pounds extra hops? And that's just the extra stuff. So normally there's one full year of hops in storage. It's like 100 million pounds beyond that. So there's 2 years in storage, which is, and probably even more than that, but we don't know about all the hops that are laying in warehouses all around the world.
So Doug, how does the average harvest from this year affect the price that brewers will pay this year?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let me start with this. So one thing that's interesting I've noticed over the past year, especially, is the push in the marketing literature has gone from fresh to, older hops are actually just as good as fresh hops, and old hops can keep their brewing value for up to 8 years. You see a lot more of that now than you ever did before. And that's because they're sitting on a mountain of hops that they need to sell. And it's not wrong. It's always been true that hops, they don't go bad just because there's a new harvest that came in. So to answer your question, if you're a a brewer who doesn't get the idea that last year's hops or even hops from 4 years ago are, if they've been stored properly, of course, there's the caveat, are just as good as fresh hops, then you're going to pay more. But all those old hops out there just represent a huge opportunity to get a deal, get a good deal, because the perception is that
Mm.
they're old and they're no good. But that's not true. I mean, I know brewers that use older hops and to save money, and they buy them on the spot market, and they don't complain at all. I mean, they're happy with the quality of the product they're getting. So but the battle has been for a long time, so long. Oh, you got to have the freshest crop. You got to have the freshest. If
Mm.
it's not fresh, then it's no good. Come out, select your fresh hops, and so then brewers go to Yakima and they're smelling hops left and right. And who knows if they even get the hops they smelled? Uh, that's another question. I mean, if you're a small brewer and you're buying, let's say, a ton of hops, and when they're making the pellet, those hops get mixed in with 30 tons of hops. How do you know you're getting the hops that you wanted? I mean, there's no way to guarantee you got the exact thing you smelled there. So there's a lot of smoke and mirrors and shell game type stuff that happens. And I don't even know if brewers care at some point. I mean, they go to Yakima
Mm.
to have fun. They smell the hops. I'm not saying that the selection is useless. For some brewers, they get exactly what they pick. If you're bigger, if you're a bigger brewer, you're going to get what you select and what you want, because bigger brewers get treated better than smaller brewers. But yeah, the basic message is there's a lot of discount opportunities that are out there for brewers, and they should buy the old inventory, or inventory that's even been, as long as it's been stored correctly. It doesn't matter whether it's at a brewer's place or at a merchant's place, it's still going to
Mm.
be good. And the more brewers and so that's not a message that anybody in the hop industry is going to want to hear, because they're going to want to hear, well, contract, well, we'll just sign a 1-year contract, because they need the contract to finance their farms. And if they
Mhm.
don't get that money, well, then they have to suddenly, join reality. But they overproduced for so many years. Actually, they should be in favor of brewers buying completely from the spot market and using up that inventory as quickly as possible so they can return to a system that favors them again. Because the system where there's a massive surplus doesn't favor any farmer. I mean, that's just a mess. Because they want, a
Mm.
farmer wants to farm. They want to just keep producing hops. And the merchants contracted them into a position where they can't do that now, for for better or worse. And of course, they're going to blame the brewers. Brewers are going to blame them. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. There's a massive surplus, and so it's an opportunity. Uh, yeah, getting rid of it as soon
So,
as possible.
so where does this year's harvest stack up in terms of volume? I mean, your estimated volume, but your volume compared to previous years.
Yeah, so that this is actually going to be the first year where you'll see a decrease in production in the U.S.
Mhm.
And so last year was about 100 million pounds produced. And this year will be, well, I'd say 80, but let's say 82 or something like that. So it's the first year where there's actually a decrease. So it means that it's the first year where there's a chance that the surplus can be eaten up a little bit. But if the demand is falling, I mean, we don't know how much the demand is falling. So the amount of surplus that's going away will probably be less than anticipated. But yeah, it's the first year where there's a noticeable change in production, because the last 2 years produced about 100 million pounds. 2022 because there was a bad crop, and then 2023 because of the acreage production, but they both ended up at about acreage reduction. They both ended up at about 100 million pounds, but getting there different ways. Uh, and the estimate that's out there publicly, I think it was from Alex Barth, he said the demand for American hops is about 100 million pounds. I don't know whether that's true, and I tend not to
Yeah.
believe that, but that's what he said. And so if he's correct, then this would be the first year where the reductions will lead into the surplus. And so hopefully he's right, and they start
Mm.
eating that away. I have a feeling it's quite a bit less than that. Uh, the reason I say that is because the inventory built up pretty quick. I would estimate it's closer to 90 or in the 80s, 90 million pounds a year or in the 80s for the demand for. But
Mhm.
at the end of the day, probably nobody knows exactly, but he
Yeah.
should have a good idea.
Yeah. So this will be the first year where there's going to be the demand outweighs the supply, which would then eat into some of that surplus.
Yeah,
Although, as you mentioned, many people are reliant on fresh, or latest crops, whatever you want to define it as.
right.
So if that demand is even 30% of that 100 million, then in theory, the surplus doesn't really
Right.
move too much, does
Right.
it? It just kind of stays the
Yeah.
same.
And then complicating that even more, obscuring the runway even more is the fact that the economy is bad. And so people are looking for more efficient ways to brew beer. So they're moving to extracts and oils and all that sort of stuff. And there's, a couple of new companies making oils. So that has a massive effect too. And that's uncalculated.
Yeah.
And so we don't know yet. That's the kind of thing you can only really know in hindsight. But that's going to play a role too. And that's why I say you can't really know where the runway is. So you're flying blind, really. Uh,
So that's a great question I've been wanting to ask you, Doug, is how it's been a clear shift towards new hop products from both hop companies. And I mean, of course, oils, which aren't really hop companies. There's a lot of liquid hop products
yeah.
now. What is your opinion on how that will affect the hop market as a whole? Is this big shift towards liquid hop products and that the hop companies themselves are pushing?
Yeah, I've heard it from different sides. I've heard from the brewing side that good and bad things. So I've heard criticisms of the products themselves that they don't deliver the flavors that the brewers want. But then from the other side, from the oil production side, specifically with Totally Natural Solutions, which is over there in England,
Hmm.
uh, Colin's a good friend, and he's told me it's really a process to work with a brewer to figure out what they need to get to the flavor they want. And so I have a feeling that those brewers that didn't get what they wanted maybe didn't put enough time and effort into it and
Hmm.
experimentation, because it sounds like it can take 6 or 8 months to figure out how to simulate a recipe, but with those products. But that it's possible. It's a lot of work. And I have a feeling that,
Yeah.
maybe the brewers that have tried it and complain about it, tried it, and what, in a way they thought it would work and it just didn't. So then they, bad first impression, they move away. So I think there's a lot of potential there, actually. And I think money will, or the lack thereof, will drive people more and more in that direction because they'll have no other choice. I mean, you can't keep throwing 6 pounds of hops per barrel in the brewing. It doesn't make any sense. And as the price of
Yeah.
hops goes up after the surplus is done, that's going to be even a harder call to make. But actually, that's a good point. So I think, and you asked the question like about the prices and that. So I think it's hard to say prices are going to go up or prices are going to be cheap this year because there's going to be two different levels of prices. The older hops that are sitting in storage will be cheaper and fresh hops will be at a premium. So the question is really, do you think you need, what do you believe you need? And I think that comes down to somebody's beliefs more than anything, not science. So for better or worse,
Yeah.
I mean, if I was a brewer, I'd buy old hops. I'd probably try to see how old they could get. I'd ask for them to be tested. So, because what often happens is the hops will be produced and tested and labeled when they're made the first time. And then they can be sold with that same label on them. And, people just say, well, these are 2020 hops. And the label says whatever, 17% off or 12% off, whatever it is that you're buying. But that product might have degraded, and you could easily do an alpha test or an essential oil test if you're buying enough, that is, because an alpha test is pretty cheap. An oil test is not that expensive. It's a couple $100, but it's definitely doable. You take a sample and then you know exactly what you're buying, and then either feel good about the discount you're getting or haggle a little bit. And I think that's something that people don't do enough of, is haggling. I know when I was selling hops to brewers, craft brewers especially, I mean, the big brewers, they want to dictate the terms to you, unless there's a shortage. But the craft brewers often just take the prices that they're offered. They don't haggle. And maybe with proprietary varieties, there's less opportunity to haggle. That's a different story altogether. I mean, that's something we should talk about too. But I think they should. But to do that, you have to be knowledgeable about the market and what's going on. And I get that a lot of smaller brewers don't have time for that. So that might be the big problem, is they don't have time and there's nobody to do it on their behalf.
So what about the liquid hop products and, not the extracts, but the hop products that the hop companies themselves are selling? Do you know how that's affecting sort of the hop supply itself?
Well, I think it's more the latter that affects it, where they're so much more efficient that you need less of it. So like with hop oils, for example, maybe you're a massive brewer and you need a liter of some oil product. And I don't know the numbers, but let's just say, just for the sake of argument, that it takes 100 pounds of hops to make that liter. But to get that effect, you might need 1,000 pounds of hops. So you've just cut out the demand for 900 pounds. And that's a real thing. I don't know if those numbers are right, but in principle, that's what happens. So yeah, that's definitely affecting the demand for raw hops. And that's got to be a concern. That's what I was getting at before when I said that's another thing that's obscuring the actual demand that's out there. So we don't know what demand is because it's a moving target.
Presumably they're using old crop years to make these hop products with.
Yeah, you could just as easily as fresh. I guess the reason I'm hesitant to say yes is because there could be, it depends on circumstances, of course, but there could be more oils in the fresh. Like, for example, myrcene is something that kind of goes away quickly if it's not stored, if hops aren't stored properly. If the temperature's too high or something like that, it's, in the oxidization process or the aging process, you're going to lose volatile oils. And so an older crop would still have oils in it for sure. But it'd be less efficient on the production side of the oils to do that. And then they'd have to charge more, I think, but they might pay so much less for the hops that it might equal out in the end. So it's that I don't know the math behind all the production of the oils, how much it costs to either distill or extract those oils from the product. So
it's just interesting to see how the market's shifting quite quickly on that. I see loads more hop products advertised, and I see them being used a lot more. I see a lot less of the oils. I mean, because as you said, it's quite a long time to get those to actually work for you. But the liquid hop extracts, especially the Whirlpool ones, are working really well from what I can see in the brewers I speak to and the brewers I worked in. They actually make a lot of sense because you use less of them, so there's less transport, less storage, and they increase your yields pretty significantly.
Yeah, you don't have all
you're
that
not actually
vegetal matter in the tank.
and all of that matter. Yeah.
And so it just makes sense in a lot of different ways. So, yeah.
Seems like the future of the hop market to me is the way that they've the way that they've created these liquid products actually seems to work on a like for like.
Well,
You can switch this and this, and it seems to be looking like it works for that sense. I haven't seen them accurately used in dry hop. I have heard of people using them, but I haven't had firsthand experience of that
well,
yet.
you just look at the trends in the market. You have all the macro brewers use extracts and products like that. And as craft brewers get bigger, they also do that. And so that suggests that, yeah, you can do that without compromising quality. You just have to know what you're doing. Because those are all companies where there's people paying attention to the numbers. I think the problem is at the smaller production levels for brewers, there's people are busy doing 10 different jobs and they don't have time to be experts on, managing the hop purchases, for example. So, you just do what you got to do to get through and produce the next batch of beer. And that kind of feeds into another point I wanted to make. I have a feeling, well, I know from talking to a lot of smaller brewers that some don't even know which varieties are proprietary and which aren't. And they definitely don't understand the effect that that's going to have on the market or their ability to get the hops that they want. So, I mean, that's kind of a favorite topic for me. That was the topic of my dissertation when I got my PhD, is the effect of proprietary varieties on the hop market. And so I see that when I see this happening is you have a huge portion of the world's hops are proprietary. 75% in the US are proprietary. And proprietary varieties arguably caused the surplus that we have now. But miraculously, over the last couple of years, the percentage of that proprietary production hasn't changed. So it's still over 70%. And so public varieties are being cut at a disproportional rate. And maybe that's fine. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it's a foregone conclusion that the industry is just going to go proprietary. And I mean, you have it with Monsanto and the seed industry. You have 90% of the corn and soybeans being controlled by one company, basically. Maybe people don't care at the end of the day. I don't know. It sure seems like they don't. I mean, which is ironic for craft brewers who supposedly like to market local and small business. That's their thing. And then they go buy hops from Monsanto, basically the hop equivalent of a Monsanto. And I get that they they have to compete. They're trying to have the varieties that everybody supposedly wants. But I just wonder if it's not a little bit of laziness too, because, they could get those flavors some other way if they wanted to, but they don't, there's not an incentive, a financial incentive yet to do that. And I'm afraid that by the time there is, it's going to be too late to do anything about it, because I think over the next few years, there's a good chance that 25, 30% of the growers in the United States will go out of business. It's not going to stay the way it is. And there's only at most, there's only 70 right now. So you lose, let's say 30%, you're down to an industry of 50 people, with most of them controlling or involved in the sale of proprietary varieties. And I think it's very possible that proprietary varieties goes up to 90% of the acreage. I mean, why wouldn't it? I mean, the people who are selling the hops are making the proprietary varieties, and they don't market the public. They have the public varieties on their books, and they'll sell them to somebody if they ask, but they're marketing the proprietary varieties. I mean, just look at the social media of any big merchant. None of them are advertising Cascade. They're saying, that new HBC 586 just came out. It's called Crush. Whoa, I got to get some of that. That's exciting. where's Cashmere? Cashmere's a good hop too, but nobody's pushing that one because there's no royalties associated with that. So
Mm.
where's the incentive? Who's going to sell the public varieties? Nobody, because there's not going to be anybody left. That's the problem I see. I mean, if you lose 25, 30% of the growers, you're also going to probably, unfortunately, lose a bunch of the smaller merchants too. They're just going to get choked out of the market because there's no way for them to, they don't have access to the proprietary, or they won't have access to the proprietary varieties once the surplus is done. Because it just doesn't make sense. Why give that to your competitor when things are tight? Over the last 10 years, the hop industry got real sloppy. Yeah, there was so much money around, they could do whatever the heck they wanted. They could give business away to a company that markets to smaller brewers. That makes way more sense to just hire a couple people and do that in-house. So why would you allow 2 or 3 other companies to exist and make profit when you could make more profit just doing that in a different division of your own company? So that's the direction I see things going is, and I'm talking about the big merchants like Barth and Steiner and Yakima Chief, those big guys. Why would they give away the craft beer business like they have been? I mean, I get that it's easier to deal with the big brewers, but there's a ton of money in that craft business, and you can hire a crew of people to do it. Even if it costs you, an extra $1 million a year, you're going to make way more than that. So I think that's so there's going to be proprietary varieties, is my opinion, of course. But I have studied this kind of stuff. So I think proprietary varieties are going to lead to less choice and less selection for craft brewers. Ultimately, they'll be marked, and it'll also it'll silo them in different camps. So you're either going to be in this camp that sells you those proprietary varieties, or you're going to be over here with these guys who sell you this batch. And maybe if you're big enough, you can get a little bit of both because everybody wants your business. But if you're some small brewer, you're going to go where they tell you. You don't have a choice. You don't, you're going to buy your public varieties from them too, because they're going to make it worth your while. And that already happens, buy it all as a package. We'll give you a good price. Well, I'm sure you can just buy the proprietary varieties. It's going to just cost you twice as much. So there's no way. I mean, that's a pretty grim future if you're a smaller merchant or a smaller farmer. And it's all a result of the brewers' demand. And I'm not blaming the brewers because they're busy doing their thing, but it's the lack of awareness of where the hops are coming from and what it's going to do that is going to cause this. Because the solution is just use more public varieties. England has a bunch of interesting varieties all through Europe, Slovenia, Czech, Germany. I mean, there's all kinds of interesting public varieties out there, and the US, of course. They could use more of them, but why? They're happy getting what they get. And so they're going to perpetuate this proprietary cycle, and it's going to end up in a place where once the surplus is done, growing hops is going to be a money printing deal, because once they balance out the supply level, they can charge whatever the heck they want for those hops. And who are you going to be to tell them, no, you're not going to be able to haggle at that point. There's going to be no haggling. And that's the goal. And that's actually the advantage of having intellectual property in the first place, is you have a monopoly on the product. And they've figured out a good way, because the industry is so tiny, that that monopoly is going to last forever. And during the 20 years that the monopolies on the varieties last, anybody who might have been a competitor is going to fall by the wayside and not be able to compete. So
So how would you advise a brewer to navigate the hop market now?
Well, yeah, it's complicated. First off, I would take off any proprietary variety names off my labels, because that's just stupid. I mean, you're advertising for somebody else's product. I get that you're trying to make sales and get business and all that, but I would try to do that. Or if you can't do that because it's an established variety, then wean yourself off of the amount of that variety within that beer. So you just need a tiny bit of that variety in that beer to still legally say that it's with, whatever the variety is. But the more important part of that would be weaning yourself off of the proprietary varieties, because as long as you're buying those, you don't have your freedom. And maybe people are okay with that. I don't know. It seems they are. I mean, when I talk to brewers, they say they don't like it. They say they don't like that, this company or that company's gotten so big and they control everything. But then, I mean, the proof is in the pudding. They go and they buy those varieties anyway. So, talk is cheap. If they want to make a difference, well, it's still possible to make a difference. Then they need to wean themselves off of those varieties. And I'm not saying that there should be no proprietary varieties. There's a place for that. There's nothing wrong with proprietary varieties in and of themselves. But I don't think anybody wants one or two companies controlling the entire industry. I mean, no brewer wants that. Of course, the people in those companies want that. And that's what they're trying for. But so yeah, wean yourself off of those varieties. Try to find the flavors that you're getting from those varieties some other way. I mean, it's not that hard. I did that experiment myself, and I was able to come up with 12 different blends varieties to simulate the flavors in the most popular proprietary varieties. Now, when I went and talked to brewers about it, they were excited about that. But then ultimately, a lot of them said, well, yeah, but am I going to be able, I still want to make sure I can get Citra or Mosaic, whatever the variety was, if I want it. If I do that blend thing, am I going to piss them off? And am I going to burn that bridge? I can't afford to do that. And so, okay, yeah, I guess that's where we are, is they're afraid to experiment, which is sad. So in a way, they're self-censoring their own creativity. And that's, I think, a slippery slope, to use a played term. And it's not that the growers can do anything about it either, because the growers are also stuck. Because imagine, you have in the US again, 70% of the crop is proprietary. And you have a 3, 4, 5,000 acre farm. It used to be, before proprietary varieties, that the size of your farm was, you had a big farm, big deal. Now that's a liability. You've got to find varieties that you can plant on that acreage. And if you're not working well together with the people who own the varieties, then you're out. You're good luck finding plants to put on that acreage. You're not going to do it. So the whole game has shifted. So the growers can't afford to offend those people either. And there's so few. I mean, if the industry were bigger, there'd be more options, but it's so small that the same people that own the proprietary varieties own the big merchants who own the big extraction facilities. And so they control all the processing. I mean, most of the pellet mills are owned by those people too. There are some other pellet mills out there, but in general, it's a bottleneck. And that's only going to increase that's going to get more extreme, I guess, as the industry contracts. And it's definitely going to contract the way it's going right now. And I would say the next 3 or 4, 5 years, depends, it'll contract. And I don't think it's there yet, but I think once this harvest is over and the results are in, and then new discussions of acreage cuts come out for 2025, that's going to be the point where people decide, well, geez, I can't do this anymore. I don't have enough acreage to make the farm work. So we're getting out of hops altogether. And I don't know whether that means they sell the farm or just grow something else on that land, because they're farmers. They can do, some have options. If you're in Oregon or Idaho, you might have different options than Washington. In Germany, they can grow a lot of things. So it depends how it's going to go. But there's definitely going to be that contraction. And I mean, it all comes back to the brewers' choice. They have all the power here because all the money comes from the brewers. And ultimately, they control so it's not like there's evil hop merchants or evil hop growers, conspiring and saying, oh, yeah, we're going to do this. I mean, I'm sure that's going on anyway, but they don't have the control over how the money flows in. They have to hope for the best, and I think they just make the best of it. And they've done a great job at that over the last 10, 15 years. I mean, because there's no dummies left in the hop industry. They're all super smart guys, and they recognize an opportunity when it's right in front of them, so they'll grab it. So, yeah, that's all this that I'm talking about that's coming is I think I wrote an article about it, I don't know, sometime within the last 6 months, where I called it the apocalypse. And it's really a thing. I mean, it might not be the effects of it might not be that obvious right now, but the secondary effects of these acreage changes are gonna, I mean, if we fast forward, it's ultimately going to result in much, much higher prices and bad terms for brewers, because once the monopoly is restored, once the surplus is gone, they again don't have any incentive to get good terms or good prices. I mean, they didn't do it when they had the opportunity before. Now they do because they have to. They don't have a choice, because now, I mean, now it's a buyer's market, really. I mean, if you have the money, you can buy whatever you want. And they're so desperate to sell that they're compromising the terms. Well, hell, we'll allow you to make 20% change on your contract. You can do a 1-year contract. You wait till there's a shortage. There's no 1-year contract in a shortage. It's only 5-year contracts and super high prices. So they're nice now because they have to be, but that's not going to last for long. And by the time it gets here, it's going to be too late to fix it, unfortunately. But so, yeah, I don't know. I hate to end on a nasty note, but I did watch. I mean, it's not just me saying this either. I mean, exactly this. I'm probably the only one saying this, but about the contraction that's coming. I found a Yakima Chief video on YouTube. I think it was released in just like a month ago, and it's called the 2024 State of the Hop Industry or something like that. And I mean, it's way too long. It's like an hour and a half too long. And there's a bunch of people talking, but Mike Smith is in there. Mike Smith is a really interesting guy. He's a very, very smart guy who doesn't speak in public all that often. So he's an owner in Yakima Chief, used to be an owner in Hop Union before the merger. So he's probably the biggest owner of Yakima Chief. I don't know that for a fact, but I'm guessing. He's an owner in the hop breeding company, which makes all the proprietary varieties. He has a hop farm, Loftus Ranches. He's got a brewery. He's an interesting guy. He knows a lot about the industry, and he's in there too. And so what I found myself doing, not no disrespect to all the other people that were on the panel. There were like 5 people on the panel. I ended up just skipping to the parts of that video where Mike Smith was talking, because he always has something interesting to say. And I would recommend that to anybody. I mean, once you're done with listening to Chris's podcast, it was worth, and that gets that hour and a half video down to like 15 minutes, which is much more manageable. So I would recommend everybody do that. And he's talking about a coming contraction also. I mean, it's obvious to everybody in the hop industry. What's not obvious at this point is who's going to survive, because it's like musical chairs sort of thing. And there was a pretty brilliant, call it a merger, but it's just like an agreement to work together between Roy Farms and Loftus Ranches, so that's Mike Smith, who I was just talking about, and the Roy family. And they have a bunch of acreage. And that was really smart on their part, because that guarantees they get a seat when the music stops. But because they have a bunch of acreage, that's going to guarantee that a few smaller people don't have a seat once the music stops. So, and I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of deals like that available, an insider like that, between a company that can produce a bunch of hops and somebody who needs a bunch of hops in the future. So yeah, that's an interesting one. And I think we'll start to see more alliances like that form, but some of them will be out of desperation and they won't work. So it's
really fascinating. I'll check that video out.
Don't forget to fast forward through a bunch of it. But yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it is. And I'm surprised only
Doug, is there
has 300 views. So I checked it before we got on here.
Oh, really?
So apparently nobody knows it's out there. But
it's so funny. I mean, I haven't seen it advertised. Normally, that's the sort of thing the algorithm would pump straight to me.
Yeah,
I would think so. It's interesting. Doug, is there anything else you want to talk about or add into the podcast?
Oh gosh, I think we touched on a lot of things today. I don't think we missed anything that's really urgent.
Great.
Yeah, I've had fun. I appreciate the opportunity.
Of course, man. It's always great to have you on, Doug. I learned so much. It's absolutely fascinating. My video is going to be very boring because it's going to be me just going like, what? Like nodding my head and interested. So I'll have to make sure you're front and center when this goes on YouTube.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the compliment. That's nice to hear.
Yeah. So thank you so much for coming on, Doug. It's always a pleasure. And I hope to have you back on the show in the future soon.
Yeah, anytime. That'd be great. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode with Doug on hop harvest. Ended up talking just even more about hoponomics, such a fascinating subject. Really can't wait to have Doug on the podcast again in the future. Thank you to everyone who's listened to both the episodes. If you didn't get a chance to listen to the original episode on hoponomics, please go check it out on the Modern Brewer Podcast. And for those who are listening in the first week of release, I will see you at the Brewers Congress in London on the 23rd and the 24th of September. So thank you so much from me, and I'll catch you on the next episode of the Modern Brewer Podcast.